So, Alec, we're recording now January 22nd, 2024. As we sit today, you're a farmer that's had experience farming at various farms. Now you're starting up your own farm, and that's what this series will focus on, you starting up and taking your farm online. Right now, though, you are doing the startup of your farm and working part time at another farm. How's that been so far, balancing working for somebody else while doing this on the side?
It's in a lot of ways it's been just sort of repeating the same sort of tasks from day to day. Like for instance, we've just had a nice little cold spell, nights into the teens, wind chills into single digits. And so it'll be like, all right, we're spending the last half of the whole day at the farm I'm working on, and we're like just putting on row cover. And then it's like, all right, so once work's over, run over to my place and then just do more of the same. But it's definitely been a bit of a balance of knowing like when to just say enough was enough and I've done all I could this week and just kind of let it lie where it may, or say like, all right, I've got an extra afternoon, let's go kick butt and get a little bit more done before the weekend.
For people to have some sense of where you're coming from, so you're working at another farm, you
Yeah,
have a
full
family,
time.
yeah, and you're married,
Yeah.
you have a family. So you're not just like single guy out there doing this who has all this time to burn. So commitments outside of work. About how many hours can you spend on your farm a week this time of year?
Yeah, with the shorter days, it's definitely tougher. I would say I try to be at crop culture at least 3 evenings a week, 3 to 4 evenings a week, and so that's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 2.5 to 3 hours, and then try to dedicate at least a full Saturday or Sunday. Sometimes it's like a full Saturday and half a Sunday. So I mean, it's definitely pushing like a part time in the neighborhood of like 15 to 20 hours right now.
So a lot of outside time dedicated to that. For the land itself, you've been working on it since September, right?
Yeah, yeah, we actually signed on the property and started in September.
So between September and now, what's been done on the farm and like what's sitting there today?
Yeah, so when we started, it was there was some infrastructure in place, like there's deer fencing around. Somewhat of a wash pack was already established from the person who had been using the property previously. A propagation space, a high tunnel with no plastic on it, and then about an acre of like arable tilled land. And so since we've gotten on there, we've gone through and have been in the process of like building our beds, doing our 30-inch, raised beds, 18-inch pathways, doing some initial fertility just with like an organic fertilizer, just to kind of get some like nutrients in the ground. And then got a big dump truck load of compost in. So on top of like tilling and shaping our beds and fertilizing, and then trying to do somewhere in the neighborhood of like 2 to 3 inches of compost. And so we've done about, I'd say, just under half of the farm. The beds are shaped. We're getting compost on them, and then did everything in the high tunnel. So the high tunnel's done. It's got new plastic. It's got stuff growing in it, and did some work in the propagation house to get all that ready for seed starting and all that. And then a little bit of reworking and some replumbing and different things, building stuff out in the washback area.
I think a lot of people think of farm startup as they skip the initial stage in their mind and they just think of, okay, I'm going to start growing stuff and then move on to selling it. And it's not all the thought into forming beds, doing all this. When you look at what you started with, how daunting of a task do you think that was and has been to get it not just to where it is today, but to get it to where it needs to go to be a full on farm as you see it in your vision?
Yeah, I definitely sort of came into it with, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, like, oh yeah, it'll, maybe take a month and we'll have all of the beds, all three blocks of beds done. And, and then when you're actually out there with like stakes and string running your straight line and like digging out pathways onto the beds, without like a rotary plow or anything. Um, yeah, it definitely has been a more of a daunting task and a bigger amount of time to get that to a place of being finished than I initially thought. Uh, but but constantly through that process of stepping back and saying like, all right, is there an easier way to do this? Do we have to shovel out the beds or the pathways into the beds? Can we just kind of leave it there and maybe have tire tracks from the tractor that ran through with the tiller, or just eventually walking enough, kind of in that 18-inch ish walkway. Will that be enough? Um, or so on and so forth. So through that process of doing the hard upfront work, it's allowed me to step back and go, all right, is there a more efficient way to do this with the tools that I have and with the time that I have? And yeah, so lots of lots of evolving and adapting almost from day to day.
What's the plan of attack? Is it, I need to create a good enough farm to get me up and running as soon as possible? I need to get a farm up and running that's close to my final vision. I need to get a farm up and running that is my final vision. Meaning, your final vision, meaning like, this is my ideal farm. This is exactly how I'd want it to be, fully built out. Everything's perfect. Is it closer to you want to get to that stage, or is it MVF, minimum viable farm, and then improvements come as needed when needed?
Yeah, I tried to kind of hold everything in an open hand and be willing to like, leave things, um, and say like, well, ideally this is what I wanted to do, but I need to move forward. I would say, um, if you would have asked me this 4 months ago, I would have been like, no, this is the plan for the ideal farm. And now, a few months into um, to growing on the property and to kind of having some heavy rains, having um, some different weather events and so on, realizing that it's like, all right, let's just get, like you said, to that like minimally viable farm. Maybe we need to adjust bed length. Maybe we need to adjust like, we need to have a longer aisle here. Maybe less beds right here. So definitely shooting more for like minimally viable.
For this year, is this year a growth year? Meaning, get the farm up and running, get some sales going, build market streams, and then year two on the farm, 2025, would be the year that you can look to dial it up, perfect things.
Yeah, for sure. Um, just really wanting to yeah, see. I mean, it's a brand new piece of property. Don't even fully know how things are going to go. Like, how are tomatoes going to handle the soil conditions in this particular tunnel? And so I'd say it's get things going. Establish myself at a farmer's market. Build up a customer base kind of in our area, and just try to break even, try to cover cover some of my time, and just build the farm out so that we can step back at the end of this year and say like, all right, here's what worked, here's what didn't, here's where we were just like dumping money into something that we didn't need to, so on and so forth, so that we can really refine the process and come into 25 with a much more refined game plan.
How have you, or maybe not how have you had to limit yourself and your aspirations or desire for perfection I'll take on some projects. I can get really nitty gritty, be a perfectionist when perfection is not needed, and then find myself realizing, oh my God, like I'm spending so much time on this small thing that isn't that important or nobody's going to notice. You have this big, daunting job of getting this farm up and running. Do you find yourself getting caught in these perfection traps of, the pathway's got to be, edged dead straight or perfectly or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been those moments, like had my dad out there helping me, um, kind of like running straight lines with string and with tape measures to try to get our, you know, like because we have a big long row of stone flower beds that are in a straight line, and so it's like, all right, well, here's our straight line that we're going to base everything off of. So this aisle right here needs to be exactly 8 feet, and then everything off of that. I mean, we spent 2 days just trying to make everything square, and now that we have all the beds done, it's not square. But when you look at it, you don't go like, oh man, this is totally off kilter. Um, so I've tried to not um, be such a perfectionist. I tend to not be. I tend to kind of be like, all right, this works, and let's go with it, and then you know iterate if we need to later. I think spending 2 years on a farm that's been operating for 3 decades has really showed me that like perfection is usually never the goal, and is frankly never the result. But getting to that point of like, all right, this will work. These beds are they're not perfectly straight, but the bunching onions aren't going to know any different. The drip tape will still work. And let's get stuff planted, and and get stuff out and sell it. And so, yeah, I think perfectionism uh, is definitely something that gets thrown by the wayside often.
Because in some ways you're under the clock because you're leasing the property. I know you've negotiated to get start payments later in the year when the farm
Yeah,
would be cash flowing, July, something like that.
yeah, July.
So it's not as though you can take some leisurely setup and, hey, if this farm's ready to go this year, great. If it spills into next year, great. It's that balancing act between it needs to be good enough, but it also needs to be done because
Hmm.
eventually, the check's going to have to be written. The property's going to have to start cash flowing itself, and doing non-productive work. Building beds, I get it has to be done, but it doesn't directly contribute to revenue. uh, at some point, like, that stuff's got to be done, and you got to be doing work that brings in revenue. So do you feel the pressure of that as the days tick on? I mean, it probably felt like in September you had all this time. Now we're in
Yeah,
January.
yeah. I think the kickover into the new year definitely was like, all right, this is like it's time to put it into another gear, because I think subconsciously we have that idea like, all right, it's a year away, and even if it's only a couple of weeks away, then all of a sudden it's like, all right, it's January, and now it's like the end of January. And this market starts in April, and it's like, and I'm looking at like my seed starting and my crop planting, and it's like, all right, the stuff that I'm doing now is what's going to be harvested at like the end of April, beginning of May. So it's like, so let's hope that everything that's in the ground right now, or that's at least in the seed house, like let's hope this is enough to get us through the first couple markets of April. So definitely starting to feel the squeeze on like, yeah, you know what? Let's not worry about finishing up getting block 2 built out, the beds, and let's make sure that there's compost on everything on block 1, and that we have everything planted that we can. Where before it was like, yeah, let's get the whole farm, get everything shaped, get everything perfect, laid out exactly the way we want to, and then we'll come back through with compost, and then we'll start planting. And so it's definitely been a little bit more of like scaling back and almost treating it like, all right, this is going to be zone 1. Like this is going to be the farm for the spring, is just block 1. And then we'll expand to probably block 3 for some of our, low rotation stuff, winter squash, so on and so forth. And then expand on. So trying to, like we said, constantly iterate, and not just be like, here's my plan, and just stick my head down and keep doing the same thing, but realize it's like, all right, with the time that we have and the resources that we have, maybe we need to sort of like zero in on just this one particular thing with the time that we have.
Yeah, at this point, what are the biggest constraints in terms of resources? I'm thinking, all right, it's definitely time. If you're working and you have outside commitments, there's money. You can't just hire someone to come do all the work,
Yeah.
right? Or bring everything you need in. Are those the two big constraints? I mean, I guess there's maybe also, is there a mental, this is one that's the hard one to quantify, like a mental burden constraint of, I don't know. I get this. If I'm doing, eventually at some point, working more hours is not effective because I just start to burn out and
Yeah.
not enjoy it, and it's not productive. So, like, I only have, I might have more available time, but that time's going to be wasted if I try and put it towards something productive because I've already worked enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, time, working full time on another farm, and just like the toll that that takes on like your body, being there for 40 hours a week in the cold or in the heat or doing whatever. And then you're freezing out there. It's like 30 something degrees all day, and then you have to sort of like pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just be like, all right, now I got to go to my farm and cover everything up until 8, 9 o'clock at night with a headlamp on. So time is definitely like the biggest constraint. Money, thankfully I was able to get an investor in the business, someone to really work with me who believes in what we're doing to make it possible because um, you know I felt that having the experience of being on a working farm was more valuable than being able to have capital squared away to get a new farm going. And because it's like especially in hindsight, like if I had all the money that I needed to get this farm going but didn't have my last 2 years of experience, you know I'm nowhere near where I am now. And so but making that choice meant that we didn't really have a whole lot of capital personally that we could inject into the business. So but having that investor, having a friend who's willing to to work out a really good interest rate and all that sort of stuff, who wants to see the farm succeed, that definitely sort of took a big amount of that financial burden off. Now, obviously, I still have to pay him back. That begins when the rent payment also starts, and it wasn't just a blank check. It was a like, all right, I want to see your plan on what this money is going to go to, and like I need to get like regular check-ins on like how are you spending this money. Um, and so which is good because it's caused me to like refine that and to be a little bit more cost conscious, where before I was like, all right, we're going to buy this and this, and it's like, all right, well, maybe we don't, maybe we need to scale back and we don't need the pinpoint seeder, maybe we can just do everything with the jang and I can save several $100s. And so but I would but yeah, to answer your question, definitely time, and then money, and then I would say a third thing is just the uncertainty of the customer base. I know that this market, I've been to the market that we're hopefully going to be selling into, and it's a good market. It's really busy. They're really needing someone who's going to be growing what I'm growing. But at the end of the day, I mean, you just don't know. You don't know if the online store selling to kind of local people, because we'll be selling in a different city than we live in. And it's just like, so there's that sort of that burden in the back of your mind of like, man, I hope people actually buy this stuff once we grow it and harvest it and then have it bagged and ready to sell.
Yeah, I think the financing side would be interesting to get into, and the budgeting of what you're, how you're thinking about things, because that's a big constraint a lot of people will have to deal with. I also like the point that you brought up of, there's two ways that you can go about starting up a farm. You could work and save up a bunch of money and put that money into farm, or you could farm, maybe not be able to save up as much money, but get that experience. Now, there's maybe some jobs that would give you some overlap, but that's not always the case. There's a lot of people getting into farming from very lucrative fields like computer science or coding, something like that. And they come in with a lot of resources, but not necessarily experience. And you come in with the experience side, which has its own set of value. So I think that that's very interesting. At this stage, working, it's cold, you're doing this. How many days a month are you just like, I don't want to go to the farm today? I'm not feeling it.
Um, Less now, like now that I'm seeing, because whether I'm doing it in like the quote unquote proper order or not, like block A, I guess, that we've been discussing, like it's probably, you know, like halfway full of like harvestable crop right now. Like I'm doing orders and stuff like that. And so that has definitely kind of given me a little bit of a boost and being like, when before it's just like you're just shaping beds and you're doing that. It was just like, all right, so I'm gonna get one more bed done today. Like,
It's
why
never
not
ending,
just
never ending to do list.
yeah. And so now it's even though I kind of have less time to devote to that because when I go to the farm, maybe I'm like, weeding around the broccoli, the broccolini, or I'm like, all right, let's double check and make sure that we're doing our foliar applications for all the brassicas or whatever. And so it like even though I'm not devoting 100% of my time to the build out anymore, one, I'm getting a little bit of cash flow going, a couple $100 here and there. But also I'm getting to like just see the fact it's like, all right, stuff does grow over winter. It grows really slow, but it's like I can harvest enough lettuce this week and still have enough for the next 3-4 weeks. Because by the time I'm done with the first cut, the second one is ready to go. And so that has definitely made it's given me much more motivation on the cold, wet days to to just get out of bed and go do it, or be like, man, I just want to go home and eat dinner with my family and not drive over to the farm. Um, yeah,
Has anything been sold off of the farm yet?
yeah. So um, I come from a little bit of a marketing background. I've done sales and marketing, and then I think that's just kind of how my brain is wired. And so for me, like having like being in front of eyeballs is really important. And so I probably jumped the gun on that a little bit on like offering stuff, but there's a coffee shop in town, some friends that I know that run a coffee shop in my hometown that we live in, and and they were buying stuff from local farms last year, and we're just kind of selling it, having kind of like a little marketplace there. And so like as soon as I had stuff available, like as soon as the Hackerdie turnips were of a reasonable size to bunch and to sell, and as soon as the lettuce was ready to start, harvesting, and then some of the stuff that I had from my plot that I sort of messed with last year, like some winter squash and sweet potato that I still had, I was immediately like, all right, it's in the store. I'm blasting it all over social media. Like, you guys need to come and you need to buy it. And I've been doing like a bi-weekly sort of CSA pickup. It's not really CSA. It's mostly just like friends and family, like send out a mass text and just like, hey, here's the 6 things that I have. Here's the price. Let me know by, Thursday at 5 p.m. and then we'll do a pickup at the coffee shop tomorrow. So yeah, I've been, I would say over the last month that I've been doing that, I've been bringing in about $100, $150 a week, which has been, a big motivation to keep going. It's like, man, if we're doing this with just this little bit, imagine what we can do come spring and summertime when everything's jamming.
How was it a big mental shift when it went from just farm setup to farm sales?
Yeah, it's it's definitely requiring more planning, not just of like, all right, what's the next month look like, but it's like, all right, you're gonna be at the farm tomorrow, so like plan out your day, like make a to-do list. Like got a chalkboard on the outside wall of the barn, um, so that I can like jot down like it's instead of like having it in my phone where I can pull it out and get distracted or have it written on a piece of paper in a notebook somewhere. I just have it right there so I can just like glance at it as I'm walking by from the high tunnel to the prop house. Um, but yeah, I have to plan my days accordingly better now. I realize like, all right, don't just focus all your time on harvesting, even though that's where your like direct money's coming from, because um, you still have these other beds that they need compost done. Like you need to make sure that's done. You need to make sure that you're still starting new seed. Um, because I'd say for probably a week or so there, it was like, almost like all of the build out completely faded away. And it was just on like, make sure wash pack is perfect because you're harvesting now. And, make sure that you have you're sourcing all of your bags and everything like that. And realize it's like, man, I just lost a week of build out that I could have beds ready for the next rotation of stuff to go in.
How much work now on a weekly basis, rough percentage wise, is physical versus think work? Think work is things like crop planning, planning out sales, running numbers, getting supplies ordered, just tracking where you're at, planning out what I have to do. I'm sure it's not all just grinding in the field. There's a lot off field in the office happening. How would you put that breakdown?
Yeah, it's more think work, like the think to physical work ratio is probably off more than I would care for it to be, but just the nature of it being like dark so early, where I only get like an hour and a half of like actual daylight. Um, and the temperature, it's like it's not fun to fill wheelbarrows of compost when it's 34 degrees outside. Um, so it's definitely more think work now, but I'd say um, it's probably somewhere in the like 70-30 right now, or like it's still mostly physical work. It's still mostly going out there and just making it happen. Um, and then unfortunately the think work gets kind of done at 6 in the morning when I get up to brew coffee and I'm like running through numbers, or while I'm putting the 4-year-old into bed and I'm laying there thinking about like, all right, so is $6 the right amount for the braising mix, or do we need to go up to 7? And so a lot of the think work kind of gets done in and around all of the other stuff, sort of like poor multitasking, but multitasking nonetheless.
Yeah, I get it. Sometimes it's hard to shut that switch off.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're thinking about it other times. If you look at the horizon, what's coming, what's the thing that scares the shit out of you as of today, or things?
Um, I would say scares the shit out of me the most. Probably that my that like my ideal numbers, the like shooting for like, all right, if we can make $1,000 a week at the farmers market, like we're golden. We're gonna be like right in the sweet spot, cash flow positive, whatever. That I'm gonna get to the point when that starts happening and realizing that my like expenses like far outweigh um, what I thought they would, and that it's gonna require a lot more sales to like get to that point of being able to say like I'm full time on the farm, like because that's the end goal, is that I don't have to work at 2 farms. I can be at 1 farm, and my family can be with me and we can do that. So I think that's the scariest part, is that like with the constraints of the 1 acre that I'm working with, and and with the outlets that I have, which I can always change and expand, that that it's not going to be enough. Like that it's going to be, and not just like, all right, well we need to refine our rotation, our successions a little bit better, but it's just like, you know what, with the soil that I have and with the conditions that we have, like there's just really not a way to hit that magical, perfect, market garden number of like, 100,000 an acre, in sales. And so, there's probably other things that should scare me more, but it's like there's just so many things going on that, frankly, I haven't really thought about the other scary things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I get it. I mean, that's a huge one in any business of I'm bringing this product online. I expect it to do X. If it's greater, awesome. If it's less, ooh, what happens? Because I mean, anytime you start selling, it's either sales could be less than expected,
Yeah,
um, expenses could be more than expected, which you mentioned. Maybe you don't have, maybe sales are, maybe you don't have enough inventory to meet up with sales. So it's a production problem. Like that could happen. It could be a
yeah,
weather problem, um, which affects maybe market attendance or just how stuff's growing in the field. So there's all these little things there. And then the inevitable, the stuff that you're not even thinking of, couldn't have thought of, can't plan on, that will happen at some
yeah.
point. So yeah, there's a lot out there going on. What about this? What are the things that, if you look back over the last week, 2 weeks, that are like the biggest wins, the things you can celebrate the most given the stage you're at your farm?
I would say, um, 2 weeks ago was like my first big like local pickup. We did that, with just like sending out a bunch of texts and like DMs to friends and family. We have like a pretty tight knit like church community, and so I basically just hit up a bunch of people from there, and we're like, hey, Friday night, like when we're all done, we're all gonna be together. It's like I've already kind of caught you. You don't have to drive to anywhere separate, but like when we're done Friday night, where they're gathering, like I'm gonna be posted up in the parking lot, and you order your stuff and then come get it from me. And I had done that probably a month ago and had like two people out of all my friends and family that were like, we're going to support you. We're so excited. Like two people bought stuff. And that was like the biggest bummer in the whole world. But it was also the week, like it was 2 days. I think it was the 23rd. Like it was literally 2 days before Christmas, which I shouldn't have been so disappointed with. But 2 weeks ago, I did like my first big one, and you know didn't have very many people come out and or like actually like kind of place an order with me. It was maybe close to a dozen. I can't even remember off the top of my head, but it was $200 worth of stuff. And to realize it's like, man, if 10 people can generate $200 worth of stuff, or almost $300 worth of stuff, then it's like, man, this like I think that was one of those moments where it's like, we can do this. Like if this amount of people can generate this amount of income, then we can do this. Um, I would say that was a big win, and then also like the first sort of like harvest of like salad mix. Because at least from the people that I know around here who are farming and are selling in market, like there's not a ton of like specialty greens. There's some, but most everybody's like selling wholesale, or they're doing their own CSAs type stuff, and like doing like a really good spring mix. And there's just not a ton of that. And I've been told like it's really hard to make it profitable. And so, but harvesting all of that, running it through the greens bubbler that I built, and then like laying it out to dry, and then putting it in bags, and just like stepping back and looking at it, being like, oh my God, like, and then giving it to people, and then getting text messages and calls, and people hit me up being like, oh my God, that's the most amazing salad I've ever had. Like those two things were sort of the reality check of like, we're gonna do this and we're gonna make this happen, and it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, I think those things are so important as a new entrepreneur, not that, or an entrepreneur starting a new business is maybe the better way to say it, because it can be hard to just feel like you're doing all this work and there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing positive coming out of it. It can be, you can be ignorant and just get caught up in your dreams of like what this will be, and without some reality check of, well, what does the public and market actually think about this thing that you already love? it's hard. So when you get these responses, they say, all right, yes, it reinforces what I thought. It's positive. The work that I've been doing is going towards something. And then you build upon those and, just
Yeah.
leverage those things and use it as the fuel to keep you going.
Yeah, and I think also too, it's given me the reinforcement that it's like I can charge when I need to charge. Because like most of the people who are buying my stuff right now, um, they're doing it because they're supporting our business because they're
Yeah.
friends, their family. They're not. It's not like, oh, we were going to go to the farmers market on Saturday, but instead we're going to buy from you. But I'm charging like fair market prices that I will be charging at a farmers market, and kind of your like normie off the street who are my friends are like they're not batting an eye. They're like, oh no, yeah, you know what? Give me 4 pounds of winter squash. And so I think that was also a big encouragement. It's like, oh no, like I can get regular, quote unquote regular people to buy into this, not just the affluent people who are going to be coming to the farmers market in town somewhere.
This is validation, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And also some knowns. Like that's the other hard part about a new business is you think you know what you can charge, you think you know what you want to charge. Will the market actually pay it? I don't know until I sell it. You
yeah,
start to sell it, you see the market response. Hey, we like that price, we don't like that price. Now you can really start to refine things, go from there. Like you said, be confident in what you're selling, know that the prices will work. So I think there's a lot there. You look ahead to the next week. What's the thing you're looking most forward to doing?
most forward to doing. It's finally like uncovering everything, taking all the row cover off. And it's been a cold snap. For us, kind of what are we, zone 8A, I think, down here in Georgia. Like getting into the teens is like a big deal for us. And probably a bit of a rookie mistake, like have some stuff, some Asian greens, bok choy, Mizuna, those sort of things that are not really like super tolerant to those. Like it's not kale that's just like, yeah, bring it on. I can tough it out into, whatever temperature. Um, so definitely looking forward to going tomorrow morning and pulling all that off now that like the cold snap is done and the weather's saying like we're not gonna really dip below freezing, but with like one night over the next 2 weeks. And so getting everything a chance to like, really get full sun, it's gonna rain, get some good water on everything and then and then keep and like now that everything's sort of thawing out, like um, keep chugging away at like laying more compost, getting those beds ready for the stuff that's in the seed house that's like begging to go out.
Yeah, a lot in store, so a lot to do. And before you know it, I mean, it's going to be spring,
Oh my gosh.
long days, warm temperatures. Everything's going to be growing, including weeds. So it'll be busy
Yeah,
before you know it. And enjoy these cold days while you have them.
yeah, for sure.